despite international concerns about Russia's involvement in the country, well, the support for the president, Vladimir Putin, has in fact skyrocketed. Mr. Putin was already popular at home, winning the 2012 election with 64% of the vote. According to one Russian polling group, 84% of Russians now approve of Mr. Putin as president. That's up almost 20 points since the beginning of this year. Let's get perspective from Ilya Ponomarev, a Russian opposition figure and member of the Russian parliament. He was the only Russian politician in the Duma to vote against annexing Crimea. And he joins me now live from Boston. So thanks for being with us, first of all. When you see and read about Britain saying that there is a large-scale Russian incursion going on in Ukraine, do you believe that's the case?
I think that there is a serious involvement of Russian troops on Ukrainian territory, and that has been confirmed, unfortunately, by dead soldiers that are sent back home and which are secretly buried in Russian villages and towns where they originate from. It's shamefully that they were buried in such a secrecy, and after it was disclosed, and now there are a lot of media leaks on that, photos of the graves, etc., they started turning off the plates with their names so that nobody would actually know who is buried there.
What do you think Vladimir Putin wants out of all of this? Because we have, you mentioned photos that are coming out of secret funerals, but also satellite imagery, intelligence agencies, both in Britain and the United States, saying they have evidence that Russian soldiers are inside Ukraine. What do you think Vladimir Putin wants from Ukraine at this stage?
I think that Vladimir Putin perfectly understands that United States, UK, Europeans, that they understand the actual degree of Russia's involvement in Ukraine. And paradoxically, I think that what he really wants, he wants negotiation, and he wants to make a deal. He wants to make a deal with the West that would acknowledge the situation with the Crimea, that it's annexed by Russia and stays with Russia, and in return that he would withdraw troops from eastern Ukraine. And he thinks that the best way to start those negotiations is to mount up the heat in eastern Ukraine. He thinks that the more pressure he applies, the more chances are that it would be talks.
One of the things you told my producer is Putin grew up in a, quote, mafia-type environment, that this formed his character early on, and this is informing the way he acts as president of Russia.
Yes, he likes to portray himself as a tough boy, and he really is from very common circles of Russians. He grew up in St. Petersburg suburbs in a pretty tough and challenging environment. And he always wrote in his books and said in his interviews that when you're tough, you're being respected. That's his position in life. So he likes to be tough because he wants to be respected.
Do you think that, I mean, essentially, you think Russia has now invaded Ukraine, as many in the West are saying is the case?
I think we have, unfortunately. And I think that the reason why Putin keeps so low profile about this fact, I think that originally he wanted to announce that we are sending our troops to Ukraine on the 14th of August when he was assembling members of Russian parliament in Crimea, but at the last moment he stopped and didn't say anything about that, but actually sent the troops next day on August 15th. So I think that why he wants to keep low profile, because he wants Russians to think that we are good guys in this conflict, that we're actually just supporting the rebellion against the fascism in Kiev, that we are not aggressors, and that's very important for him.
Well, I was looking at the approval rating, and we mentioned there in the 80% range, 80, 85%. So Russians inside of Russia seem to be supporting their president in these actions. You're in Boston right now. You voted. You were the only one out of more than 400 Duma members to vote against approving the annexation of Crimea. You're extremely candid right now, critical of the president, calling what Russia is doing an invasion. Are you concerned when you go back home that it's safe for you?
Of course, I'm concerned, because the pressure is there, and they just recently has frozen my bank accounts, and they are threatening to stop me from doing any international travels, to close the border for me. But I still have to do what I am doing, because that's my position, and I cannot tell lies just because I am threatened and scared and whatever, So I have to do what I'm doing.
All right, Ilya Ponomarev, thanks so much for joining us from Boston, a Russian Duma member from you represent Siberia, is that correct?
Yes, I represent Novosibirsk. It's the capital of Siberia and capital of Russian innovations, and that's actually the reason why I'm here in Boston. I'm talking to innovators so that the flow of technologies to my hometown would not stop because of the sanctions.